I'm the one who usually chases out the Bernie supporters and similar riffraff, but it looks like Phelps got rid of the commies. So, dear commies, dear people who get offended easily, like if you've ever used the words, I'm offended, and expected any adult to care, this would be a great time to go get a bourbon or whatever it is you people drink, your soy latte, whatever. Now, let's say you have these views and you want to sit and listen anyway. That's great. Understand what, for example, my children go through for 25 years. Right? This is the school system and the press, and the fact that you've been the little boy in the bubble, oh sorry, that implies you have a gender, tells you just how sheltered your little world is. So last point for the communists in the room, by which I mean Democrats and left, assuming you can get left of that anymore. It takes effort, evidently. But these are the people who want to run the world. Right? We should run your health care, we're going to run every aspect of your lives, but we can't count votes, which the Romans and Greeks managed to do 3,000 years ago. Good luck, Iowa, yay. That's nice, you know? It's kind of like the Obamacare website. I could have done that for about $100. If you're here and you're a socialist, understand that you're a hypocrite, right? You're voting to increase taxes and then listening to me in order to not pay them. That's hypocrisy. Right? Just want you to be aware of that. And by the way, I take as good as I give. So if you want to heckle and have fun, go ahead. Do be aware, I'm rather good at what I do. I'm in Puerto Rico, and it's primarily, but not exclusively, to avoid taxes. So Puerto Rico, U.S. territory, right? So it's part of the U.S., but it's not kind of an in-between thing. First of all, I think somebody mentioned we had a Puerto Rican in the audience. Puerto Rico. It came out, the Puerto Ricans have a very distinct accent in Spanish. I spent 25 years learning Chilean Spanish, which is the other Spanish that no one thinks is Spanish. And it's slipped out. The Puerto Ricans use a lot L's instead of R's. So instead of Puerto Rico, you might hear Puerto Rico. And so that slipped out the other day. I was talking to a little girl. We're walking our collie, which they don't have those in Puerto Rico. It's like magical. So she has a fan club. I'm 50 years old. It's too late to do anything about it because the fan club is young and hot. If only I would have known that 30 years ago. There's a list of these things. So I'm walking the dog, and a little girl asked me, muerde. And that's, in other words, does she bite? Which normal Spanish speakers would say, muerde. And I just said right back, and my wife was with me, I go, no muerde. Oh, did I catch hell at home for that later? But, so Puerto Rico, there's a huge tax break, and it can apply to note people and real estate people. Very briefly, the French tax system is syphilis. The US tax system is herpes. I can get rid of syphilis. Right, most tax systems are territorially based. So if you're French and you're taxed in France at ridiculous socialistic rates, you can do what a great many French people have done, especially people with talent, and move. London is now the 6th largest French-speaking city in the world as a result. So you leave France, you don't pay their tax anymore. It's territorial. Ours is citizen-based, so the IRS follows you everywhere. Right, you go to Switzerland, pay 20%, your rate here would have been, let's say, 35%. The IRS shows up and says, we'll take the other 15%. That there is some hardcore fascism, state control type of stuff. The exception to it is US territories. If you go to a US territory, and you have to be a bona fide resident, it's not enough to vote and get a driver's license and stay exactly 184 days. You actually have to live there. If you do, my tax rate, I have 2 tax rates in Puerto Rico. On my law practice income, I pay 6%, period. Federal, state, local, all combined. That savings right there pays for about my living double. The savings are about double what we live on. On my interest and dividends, I pay, and capital gains, I pay 0%. So what's it like? What's Puerto Rico like? Not like the media describes it. Here's the questions I got. Did you die during the earthquakes? No. The earthquakes, so what happens is every 100 years, Puerto Rico, usually on the western side, usually the southwest, but sometimes the northwest, gets a whole bunch of little earthquakes. There'll be one decently sized one and a whole bunch of little ones. In San Juan, which is about 2 hours away, we feel it. The power company shuts off the power, which in Puerto Rico is a very regular thing. Like Puerto Rico, everyone's a prepper. Everyone has a generator, everyone has a cistern, everyone has food put away. Why? The government. The government there couldn't run a bachelor party in a horror house. The incompetence, corruption, etc., is just unbelievable. So everybody's ready for it. Nobody gets bent out of shape over it. So what does the press do? Just to give you an idea, because we were horrified there by the way the press was describing what happened, and it actually hurt the island, which upset me. The press described it as an earthquake swarm. Well, that sounds scary, an earthquake swarm. That must be bad, like bees stinging you to death or something. Ooh, bad. Let me explain what that means in English. We get a whole lot of earthquakes there once every 100 years. Last ones were in 1918, so we're about a year late, which by Puerto Rican standards is early. You get a whole bunch of little bitty earthquakes and one or two decent sized ones. My wife is from Chile, which is the earthquake capital of the world. Only Japan rivals them. And it was funny, we had there a 6.4, because that's the one that actually she felt, because she's like, if you don't have at least a 6.0, it doesn't even count. I'm serious, they don't wake her up. She sleeps right through them. So they described it as a swarm. What happened then? First of all, it was a rural area that got hit. And that's bad for the people there. There are about 3,000 people displaced, which is a small Midwestern flood that would not attract nearly as much news. Here's the bad part with the press doing it that way. This is the high season in Puerto Rico. A lot of people didn't come. They really hurt the people there with their damned fear-mongering. They lie. They lie. So I lost business. I had an Airbnb subleased for their version of Mardi Gras, Sansa. And I had $1,000 a day coming in. And they canceled at the last minute because of the fear-mongering. That sucked. I mean, I'll get over it, but that's not right. What did I like about there? And then we'll move into tax stuff. What do I really, really like about Puerto Rico? They had to tell the people to stop clogging the roads into the area that got hit. The Puerto Ricans filled their cars with water and blankets and food and diesel for generators, and they drove. And there's so many of them showing up to help that they clogged up the roads. And the government finally said, look, we know we're a bunch of cluster, but let us try and, give us the stuff to organize it. But of course, the Puerto Ricans don't want to do that because the government will take half of it, put it in a warehouse, sell it to their buddies. Half of it will rot, half of it will get sold, half of it will make it to the people. But the people, I'll tell you something I've noticed in the apartment buildings. We live in Old San Juan. You can see the cruise ships from our place. Beautiful, beautiful, stunning place. I've noticed in almost every apartment building, if there's an older couple, there's usually a younger couple that adopts them. And they go to the grocer and get them stuff, and they take them to the doctor. Except for their politics. Get me started on Puerto Ricans with politics. Everybody, you can't be perfect, right? If they were all Republicans, they'd be perfect. And you can't have that. That's not human. But they are the kindest, nicest. It's like for me growing up in the Midwest in the 70s, the sense of community and how people stick together. We love that. So we're saving a ton of money, we're having a ball, and we live in this picturesque area for which I have an immense amount of gratitude. I am so thankful to be part of that. Now let's give you something to be grateful for. We're going to talk about opportunity zones. I've got about an hour. The regulations, the new ones just came out. It's why I didn't do a PowerPoint. I'm still incorporating it, and I'm so busy, I just haven't had time to do the PowerPoint. Thankfully, I am extremely familiar with my feces, and therefore, think about it, it'll come. Usually takes a second. And so I can just do it off the hoof. Feel free to ask some questions. If there are too many, I'll slow it down. What is an opportunity zone fund? Let me give you the benefits, let me tell you who it's for, and then we'll get into the rules. An opportunity zone fund is really just one or two LLCs that follow a certain set of rules. So don't be intimidated by the term fund. Oh my God, fund. You have to be from Goldman Sachs to understand it. No, it's just an LLC that follows a certain set of rules. If you follow those rules, you get a benefit. For those of you that deal with self-directed IRAs, I think the Opportunity Zone Fund rules are considerably simpler. So if you can handle self-directed IRAs, or if you can handle self-directed 401ks, then I think you're able to handle Opportunity Zone funds. So what are the benefits? There are really 3 benefits. When you set up this LLC, you have to fund it with capital gains. You have to fund, let me clarify my language a little. You have to fund the equity portion with capital gains money. So when you buy, essentially when you buy stock in the LLC, you buy a membership interest in the LLC, you gotta have capital gains. And the generic rule, there are exceptions that we'll talk about, the generic rule is the capital gains have to have been incurred within the last 6 months. So the baseline rule, I incur capital gains, short-term, long-term, it could be on stock, it could be on the sale of a rental, it could be on the sale of llamas or sheep, whatever. You incur capital gains, you got 6 months to take that money, and see, I used the word wrongly again. You've got 6 months to take that amount of money from any source and put it into the fund. So it's not like a 1031. See, with a 1031, I got to put the whole amount in. Here, I just have to put the gain in. For example, I have something, I bought it for 10 grand, I sold it for 100 grand, I have 90 grand of gain. In a 1031, you have to reinvest the entire 100 grand. Furthermore, you're never allowed to touch the money. When you touch the money, it becomes dirty. Dirty. Think how dirty. I'm thinking Bill Clinton and Donald Trump's baby dirty. That's dirty. It screws up the 1031. With the Opportunity Zone funds, you only have to put the gain in, the 90,000, and it can be the money from anywhere. You got 180 days to come up with the cash from anywhere. So let's say I sell stock for 100 grand. I have 10 grand in it, I make 90. I spend it the next day on hookers and cocaine. I was gonna say crack, but for 100 grand, I think you can go a little upscale. You now have 179 days to come up with 90 grand, and the government doesn't look where you come up with it. So maybe some of the cocaine was reinvested, as we like to put it. And you turn around and sell your, I don't know what they call them now, I think dime bags are probably a little obsolete in today's day and age. You resell the cocaine. I don't know what it is you do. I probably don't want to know. You come up with 90 grand, you could put it into the Opportunity Zone Fund on day 179, you're good to go. So to fund one of these, you gotta have capital gains, and you have to take a like amount of cash and stick it in there within 180 days. And there are some extensions, there are exceptions to that deadline we're gonna get into, but that's our basic rule. So you've got that set up. What does that get you? The capital gains, and my example, the 90,000, the taxation is deferred until December 31st of 2026. The taxation is deferred until 2026. So we would it's a tax-free, interest-free loan. It's a loan. Well, you don't have to pay this tax until when? 2026. And by the way, I have not yet figured out a way to defer that tax past 2026. I hear all sorts of schemes for, well, we'd like more, because you're investors and you're always negotiating for more. Well, here I haven't figured out a way to do that just yet. We're working on it, but I haven't figured it out. So that's the first benefit. The second benefit is that if you hold the LLC, you hold the fund for at least 5 years, they forgive 10% of the capital gain. So of the 90 grand in capital gain, 9 grand would go away completely, and you would be taxed on 81 grand on December 31st, 2026. And that's nice. That beats a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. The really good benefit, I call this the J-Lo benefit. Great, big, beautiful back end. And this was before the Super Bowl. If they would have told me when I was a kid that somebody would be pole dancing on the field at the Super Bowl, I got such mixed feelings on that, you know. On the one hand, I'm a guy. J-Lo and Shakira, I mean, where's Salma Hayek? That would have perfected everything. On the other hand, good Lord, no class. I mean, come on. Really? You're gonna, Come on. And then I love all the people who are like, well, your kids don't have to watch it. Oh, okay, we can play that game. I can put some stuff on TV that you can walk away from. You don't like it. You want to play free speech, kids? We can do that. So anyway, why do I call this back end, the third benefit, the JLO benefit? Everything that is sold, well, let me clarify it. Once the fund, the LLC, turns 10, so let's say in 2030, it turns 10. How old are you? I'm 10 years old. Okay, great. Any qualified properties it sells, sell tax-free with no depreciation recapture. You don't even pay back the depreciation. It sells tax-free. You can't even do that with a Roth IRA, right? When you sell Roth IRA property, it sells tax-free, but you never got to take depreciation on it. You never got to write it off on your return. So those are the three benefits. Now, for those of you who've been listening to me for a while, the final regulations made two changes. They made more than two, but there were two big ones. One good, one not so good. The good one is that they clarified that debt does not screw up the tax-free status. In other words, if I put 90 grand into this thing of equity, and let's just say I lend it 500 grand personally, that's kosher. We were concerned that debt would screw up some of the tax-free nature. Based on the last set of regs, we don't think that's going to happen. That's very, very unlikely. The bad part, we thought we had until 2047 to flip properties in this. And I don't mean flip, because flips don't qualify. I mean buy, rent, rehab, sit, sell, do it again until 2047. They cut off the date to buy properties in a fund at 2028. So the last day you're acquiring a property in here is 2028. You have until 2047 to either sell it tax-free or take a step up in basis. Meaning if in 2047 something you paid 100 for is now worth 500, it has a basis of 500. If you sell it for 500, you pay no taxes, a step up in basis. So it's like dying, except without you dying. Because when you die, you get a step up in basis. And so here we're going to avoid that unfortunate necessity. So there are the benefits. Why would you be interested in this? Deferral of existing capital gains on any capital assets, stock, rentals, whatever. Partial forgiveness of the capital gains. And whatever properties you acquire with this investment, including debt from banks or debt from you, whatever you can manage to accumulate in the way of appreciated assets inside that fund are going to be sold tax-free, and you can still take the depreciation. Guys, that's a hell of a benefit. Why is the government doing this? Well, what are opportunity zones? At least in theory, they're down and out areas that need economic revitalization. And I say at least in theory because I've had several clients call me and say, have you been in this area? It might have been down and out like 2 years ago, but this is the place where the rehabbers are going, and it's gentrifying. So the zones vary. Some of them really are down and out and probably will stay down and out. By the way, almost all of Puerto Rico is an opportunity zone. They're tracked by census tract. So it's a census tract. There's maps you can Google and look it up, make sure it's current because they do change. Almost all of Puerto Rico is an opportunity zone because of that racist Trump. Yeah, he hates Puerto Ricans, which is why he gave them this huge tax break. Which, unfortunately, Puerto Rican government never misses an opportunity to screw things up. So, of the 50 states, the other 50 states, they don't add any extra burden or bureaucracy. They are like, okay, this is a federal benefit. It's going to help us build up some down and out areas. Most of the states give you the same benefit for state taxes, not all. For example, which is the one state in the union you would think is going to do something different and badly? Yeah, California, right? It's what happens when everybody's high. What does Puerto Rico do? Puerto Rico goes, here's what the politicians are thinking. And I warned you, offensive, right? So I have this retarded cousin, and he needs a job, preferably for about $400,000. How do I get my retarded cousin a job? I know. We create a new bureaucracy that you got to do everything they say for an opportunity zone. We create all these new rules to make it hard to invest on the island, and we put the retard in charge. That is precisely, am I wrong? No, see? No, and you ask, because I talked, when I get on the plane to leave Puerto Rico, I ask the Puerto Ricans, why are you leaving? And you know what they say? Every one of them. Every one of them. The corruption. You can't do business in Puerto Rico. I was on a flight to Atlanta a week ago, sitting next to a Puerto Rican. She said in 5 years in Atlanta, her income has quadrupled, and she's paying about the same amount of tax on that income that she pays in Puerto Rico, because I get a special deal, or I wouldn't go there. You know what tax normal Puerto Ricans pay? The 33% bracket for federal income tax here starts at what? About 300 grand married filing joint. In Puerto Rico, it starts at 60. So they make it hard to make money, and if you do make any, they take as much of it as they can get their hands on. For Bernie voters, you're not going to be any different. This is what you're looking to do. Think of US socialism being like Puerto Rico minus the hot chicks. For whom does the opportunity zone make sense?
Investing.
There's a specific type of investor that if you fit this profile, you're a fool not to get involved. And if you don't fit the profile, it's probably not a real good fit. You have to be willing to buy, heavily rehab or new build in these areas and hold. You got to buy, put in severe rehab or build from scratch, rent it out, and hold. If you're not willing to do all of those things, this probably isn't going to work for you. Why? What's qualified opportunity zone property? As far as real estate's concerned, it's either property that was newly built, or you rehabbed as much as you invested in the building. Did you have another walkout?
No, none.
Oh, okay, no, we saw someone walk out. I couldn't tell if she was upset. I was hoping. Well, like I said, Phelps probably cleared them out. Damn him. Guys, just so you know, what you saw from David Phelps for like a normal human, because David, we know, is not, normal. What David was so excited about and angry about was the equivalent of a normal person covering themselves in feces, getting half naked, jumping up and down on a trampoline with a political sign. I'm just saying. Like usually it's just you see the eyebrow quiver and you're like, oh, he's laughing deeply. But anyway, so with the properties, you buy, you put as much into the rehab as you have into the building. That's what most people are doing. Right? There are 3 ways to qualify. So build new, rehab as much as you put into the building. What does that mean? I buy a property for 100 grand, the land is worth 30, the building is 70. I got to put another 70 into the rehab. That's some serious rehab. And the regs loosen things up a little. They now include, for example, personal property that goes with the business as rehab, or things that are quote unquote brought into the opportunity zone. Actually, it mattered because I have a guy who bought a building that has restaurant in it. His son's a chef, and unlike a self-directed IRA, the related party rules are pretty light. So can he buy an opportunity zone property, rehab it as a restaurant, and rent it to his son, the chef? Sure, there's no problem with that at all. The related party rules with these things are much, much more loose than with IRAs. What saved his bacon was that all the equipment, the stoves, the pots and pans, the glasses for the drunkards. Guys, I almost didn't make it here. I walked in and saw that banner that said bourbon in the bar, and I was like, bourbon, my solemn word to Ingersoll. Bourbon, my solemn word to Ingersoll. And it was like this. I mean, I had to think about it. So you have to put as much rehab into the property as there is in the building. That's serious rehab. Or it's got to be a new build. There's a third way. The third way is if it was abandoned, if the building was vacant or abandoned or not in use for at least a year before the Opportunity Zone statute passed, then it'll qualify. If it was abandoned after the statute passed, it has to have been abandoned for 3 years, which we're coming up on that. So after the statute passed, I think they picked a date in December of 2018. After the statute passed, 3 years abandoned. Before the statute passed, 1 year. So that's not an easy thing to do in today's market. Has it gotten a little harder to find deals? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We're seeing a lot of people get land. Now there's a sequence. There's a sequence. And if you don't follow the sequence, I can't help you. So let me cut the question off, because I get a ton of emails. Somebody's on their phone sending me an email now saying, I own a property in an opportunity zone. How do you make it qualify? You don't, unless it's land. Unless it's land. We'll talk about that in a second. Why? There's a sequence, and you have to follow the sequence. You create the LLC, the Opportunity Zone Fund LLC. As you might imagine, there are some moving parts involved. You fund it with capital gains. That LLC buys the building. That's it. That's the sequence. The only exception I've been able to come up with is for raw land. If you don't set up an LLC, fund it with capital gains, and then turn around and use that money to buy the property, you don't qualify. You just don't. Sorry. The one exception for land has been when people have land in an opportunity zone, I can't get the land qualified, but I can get whatever you build on it qualified. And we've done a lot of that. A lot of people who had land in one of these places, they owned it before, or they even bought it, but they bought it wrong, not in the right kind of LLC. I can't fix that. I can't fix that. But what you build on it, that we can qualify.
John.
I'll come to you. Give me one more, because I'm going to forget. I'm going to do the ADD thing, so then hit me here in about 2 minutes. I mentioned deadlines to invest money. Here's the big exception to the 180-day rule. So normally it's 180 days. You have a capital gain, you got 180 days. Here's a big exception. If the capital gain comes through on a K1, what's a K1? That's what you get when you're a partner in an LLC or a member of an S corporation. Certain trusts will issue a K1. But if you get a K1 from an S corporation, from a multi-member LLC, maybe from a trust. Now it depends on the kind of trust we're dealing with. That gets a little complicated. If you get a K1 with capital gains on it, you got 3 deadlines, and you get to pick which one you like. You got 3 deadlines, and you get to pick the one you like. Deadline number 1, 180 days from the transaction. Now, Congress realized later, I should say the IRS realized later, well, you don't always know. Like, I invest in his LLC, and he's a normal entrepreneur, so he gets the tax return done about 5 years later. Or at the last minute, you know, like September 14th, and I get a K1 sometime in October. The IRS realized there are some delays, so here are the deadlines they gave you. 180 days from the sale. If you know about it, you might not. If that doesn't work, you got from January 1 to June 28th of the next year. So I'm in an LLC, it incurs a capital gain in 2019. I have from January 1 to June 28th of 2020. That's the second box I can check on the pick your deadline form. The final deadline is the most generous. You have 6 months from the unextended due date of the return. 6 months from the unextended due date of the return. Most of those returns are due March 15th, which means 6 months from then. I should say 180 days from then. It's not quite 6 months. So what's 180 days from March 15th? Presumably sometime in September, early September. Those are your deadlines. You've got, so if you have 2019 capital gains that are coming through on a K1, let me give you an example, by the way. If you're husband and wife and you normally report your capital gains right on your 1040, could you file a partnership return so they appeared on the K1? Yeah, actually, technically, that's what you're supposed to do. When you live in a non-community property state, husband and wife are considered to be partners, and they have to file a partnership return, for example, for their rental properties. So you might recognize that you've been doing it wrong all along. The IRS doesn't normally care as long as you file something. But you might start filing on the partnership return, which has a K1, which what? Buys you some time to come up with the cash to fund one of these LLCs.
I just want to make sure I understand what you were stating earlier clearly, and we'll do it in two parts, the question. The first part is that you own land in an opportunity zone presently, and you were to resell that to the new opportunity zone fund LLC that you've set up.
Wouldn't qualify.
Would not.
Would not. So the question was, if you own land or any property in an opportunity zone, could you sell it to your fund? No. Could you launder it? Because that'll be the next question. Well, I'll sell it to Tommy, and Tommy sells it to my LLC. No, that doesn't fix it. The IRS looks through that. So if you or a related person owns property in the zone, it doesn't qualify. And that's why I can't make the land qualify. What do we normally do in a circumstance like that? You either contribute the land to the LLC or you lease it to the LLC. You're allowed to do both explicitly under the regulations. The land itself still doesn't qualify, but whatever you put on it might, probably would. Yes, ma'am.
How you doing, John?
Hey, good to see you. We have a lot of reprobates in the room, I see. So for those of you who are newer to this group, this place is teeming with bad influences. I don't know why you standing up triggered that thought. I'm sure it was just coincidence.
So I have, my brother and I have an LLC that has capital gains. We're getting ready to buy a building in an opportunity zone, but we have a third party that wants in on that deal.
Okay, that's doable.
Okay, I'll call you.
All right. So, oh, and by the way, I didn't bring cards. I didn't bring anything to sell. They're really, I came here because Jim asked me to. And that's in spite of the fact that getting in here, who the hell thought to put this city in the middle? It's evidently in the middle of nowhere. Getting in and out of here, I mean, seriously? It's fun once you're here. You know, you've got lots of good beer joints. That's a plus. But good Lord, and then who put, I'm staying in, what's the name of, now I already forgot the name of the place. It's 45 minutes from the freaking airport. Who has a metro area that it takes 45 minutes to get to the airport with no traffic? So no, I didn't stay by the airport. I just stayed, I mean, I almost was like, next time I'll fly into DC and just drive here. I seem to have hit a nerve. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if I fly into DC at 3 a.m., it might work, right? I'm sorry? I don't know what it looks like. Oh, well, I mean, it's got a lot of, look, here's my measure of civilization. What are the things I miss in Puerto Rico? Because I love it, but there are a few things I miss. There's no Lifetime Fitness. Like, where's my gym with marble floors? That makes me sad. Only the finest of stone should be a receptacle for my sweat and other bodily fluids. I miss whole food, just because I do eat. I like to go make fun of the hippies, but it also has really good food. And then finally, what I miss that you guys have nearby, Barnes & Noble. I'm going to pull a Homer Simpson. I'm going to dump like books on the floor, and I'm going to throw myself on the floor and roll around on them. So Short Pump does have a Barnes & Noble, and so it meets my measure of civilization. Cool. Talking my language. Let me ask you this. Let's pause for a second. This is the basics of the Opportunity Zone Fund. As you can imagine, there are moving parts. For example, we always set up two entities, always. A lot of accountants and lawyers miss this, but there's a subtlety. See, you got to hold in the Opportunity Zone Fund 90% Opportunity Zone assets. They give you a 10% fudge factor. Cash does not count as an Opportunity Zone asset, but you're going to do a lot of rehab. So what happens if you put a whole bunch of cash in the fund, and it takes a while to do the rehab, because every 6 months they take a snapshot to see, did you pass your 90% test, right? Did you pass your 90% test? And cash doesn't count. So if you're sitting on a bunch of cash because you're going to build or rehab, it screws you up. And if you don't pass a test, you're penalized. The reason we set, the number one reason, there are two reasons. We normally set the structure up as the fund is just a conduit. We set up an LLC, the money goes into it, it can sit on the money for up to 6 months. The fund can sit on the cash for up to 6 months without a problem. And we encourage you to keep the money in the fund as long as you can, because it extends the clock in terms of how much time you have to finish a project. So keep the money in the fund. The longer, I should say the shorter of 6 months, or when a deal comes up that you need the money for. Then we set up a subsidiary to the fund. It has a subsidiary. The money goes in there in 6 months or when there's a deal, whichever comes first. The reason that we use a subsidiary is just the way Congress wrote the statute was weird. It's why there had to be so many regs. It's why for the first year and a half nobody used this law. Nobody used it. Why? It was so badly written, nobody knew what it meant until the IRS had regulations. And here's the difference under Trump. Trump told the IRS, we want you to use regs to actually help people. I'm serious. I mean, you can look up the executive orders and him getting on the phone, which he seems to do frequently with not always good results. I've been pleasantly surprised by Trump. I voted for him. I voted against him in the primary. I was going to say I liked Ted Cruz, but that's a lie. Nobody likes Ted Cruz. I liked his philosophy. I think he's a constitutional conservative and he's very thoughtful, but he's a jerk. He's not, see, Trump's a jerk, but he's a colorful, entertaining jerk. So I voted for Trump on the theory of we were confronted with a choice between crazy, that's Trump, and evil, Hillary. And I figured with crazy I had a chance. And it turns out crazy's worked out pretty well. So the first thing, because you know my three Democratic friends, they're like, how could you tolerate him? And I said, I don't pay any attention to what Trump says, because he obviously doesn't. So why should I? But I tell you what, I sure like what he does. It was funny. For the henny pennies in the room, did we have World War III? We killed an Iranian general who kills American troops. You're not supposed to do that. That's mean. It might provoke them. It's like bombing Hitler angered him. Yeah, the Iranians were shocked. You could tell they were shocked that Trump, unlike the people that protest against him, was not wearing the vagina hat. So Trump tells the IRS on these regulations, we want you to write regulations that are in English, and believe it or not, they are. I was shocked. It's like a threat to my job security. If you can understand them, you don't need the high priest to translate. That makes me sad. And he said, we want you to make the opportunity zones better and more accessible. We want you to use the regulation. Instead of using the regulation to prohibit things, we want you to use it to enable things. And that is what they've done. That is what they've done. So the opportunity zones have become a lot more useful. I'll take your question, where was I going? When you put cash into the subsidiary, you can transmute it from lead into gold. That is, from cash into working capital. Why is this term working capital important? Because working capital, unlike cash, counts as an opportunity zone asset for your test. For that 90% test where you gotta have 90% of your assets qualify, cash does not qualify, working capital does. How do you transmute cash into working capital? You put it into the subsidiary, also known as an opportunity zone business. That's the definition in the Internal Revenue Code. You put it into the subsidiary, and you have to come up with a 1 or 2 page plan. How are we going to deploy within 31 months? How within 31 months is this cash going to result in a finished project? And 1 or 2 pages will do. And then you have to follow it, not slavishly. It doesn't, things change. You have plans change, right? Who was it that said, no plan survives contact with the enemy? I know it was Eisenhower who said, plans are useless, planning is invaluable. So they know that the plans change. You've got 31 months to deploy the working capital roughly according to your plan. They'll give you more than 31 months if there's a reasonable delay. In a fit of very odd self-awareness, the IRS said, we know government screws things up, and so if there are permit delays, we'll add to your 31-month clock based on the permit delays, and so on. So they recognized what screw-ups they are. So you transmute the cash by putting it into this subsidiary and attaching a plan to it into working capital. Now for 31 months, it's an opportunity zone asset. So why did I tell you, keep the cash for 6 months in the fund, the conduit, wait 6 months, or when you have a deal, and then drop it? I want to delay that 31-month clock starting. So you've got about 3 years, not including delays, to deploy this money. So there's no deadline by which you have to buy a property. There's a deadline by which you have to finish a property. I had a question.
Talk about, you mentioned the last day that you can do this is currently it's 2028.
So the last day you can put money into the fund is 12/31/26. The last day you can buy a property is 12/31/28. And the reason is the fund, the zones, the opportunity zones expire. They expire at the end of 2028. So you can no longer qualify a property if there's no such thing as an opportunity zone from that point forward. So you've got to have a finished deal, a rehab qualifying property by the end of 2028, which we thought you had until 2047, but they clarified, no, that's too generous. We're not going to do that. You have until 2047 to sell tax-free. If you don't, December 31st of 2047, you get your step up in basis. You get your step up in basis. And here's a hint on depreciation. You probably don't want to do, or let me change that. If you're going to do, what do they call it, a cost segregation study, you do not want personal property. You can do a cost seg study for land improvements and get the depreciation on, what's a land improvement? Anything on a rental property outdoors that God did not put there. Sidewalks, driveways, fences, landscaping, etc. That can all be depreciated all at once in the first year. You can do that. You don't want to do a cost segregation study on opportunity zone for personal property, meaning carpets, stoves, appliances, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason is this: you do not get tax-free sale of that stuff. If you convert real estate into personal property with a cost segregation study, after 10 years, the sale of that stuff is not tax-free. For the accountants and geeks in the room, Section 1245 and Section 1250 gain do not get tax-free treatment. Only regular capital gain gets tax-free treatment. Questions, other questions? How are we doing on time? Where are we at?
Doing great.
Okay, no, I'll go. Guys, I like what I do. Let's think about this. There are 3 reasons I like what I do. One, I think it's morally just. I'm helping people who earn the money keep the money. I love the democratic definition of greed. It's not greedy for us to want to take it and spend it so that we feel good about ourselves without us actually doing anything to help people. Right? I want to pat myself on the back and tell everyone loudly and repeatedly how compassionate I am because I stole your money and spent it, even if the effect was crap. But it's greedy for you to want to keep what you earned. So I feel a certain moral correctness helping people keep their money. Second, I love games. I like strategy games. I was the kid who, before computers, you guys remember the old Avalon Hill games where you had a board full of 400 or 500 pieces recreating the Battle of Stalingrad or whatever? I was the kid doing that at like 7. I like to win. I like complicated rules. So it gets my alpha thing going. And finally, it pays rather well. Questions?
I'm sorry, do you mind repeating that cost segregation bit with personal property and bypass?
Yeah, so if you want to take advantage of the tax-free sale after the fund turns 10, if you want the entire sale to be tax-free as opposed to partially, if you do a cost segregation study on land improvements and you sell after 15 years, not 10 years, but 15 years, and your only cost segregation was land improvements, there will be no tax. If you sell before 15 years, and you have land improvements, there will be some tax. Not a lot, but there'll be some. That's the Section 1250 recapture. If you have any personal property broken out, carpeting, cupboards that were hung instead of cemented into the wall, appliances, window treatments, that kind of stuff. If you have personal property, that will never be tax-free. So if you break out personal property with a cost seg study in an opportunity zone fund, when you sell, it will be tax-free except the stuff you did the cost seg on for personal property. That's Section 1245 recapture for the geeks in the room. How many of you know what that means, Section 1245 recapture? Just identify the troublemakers now.
Wayne Gretzky always talks about trying to play.
I'm sorry, repeat?
Wayne Gretzky always talks about trying to play where the puck is going. So what regulation changes do you see potentially with it?
What regulation changes do I see? Okay, see, that's a problem in the modern environment. Now, I don't think the communists are going to win. No, I mean, guys, all the Democrats have to do to win, all they have to do is pretend to be moderate and sane for 20 minutes, and they can't do it. I'm serious. The only reason Biden has a chance is he appears to be moderate and sane. Senile, but moderate and sane. He's not. He just appears that way. And thankfully their base is not moderate and sane. The Democratic base is so racist that the fact that you're a white guy counts against you. I'm sorry, but that's pure racism. Racism's racism. I don't care what color you point it at. If you're a racist, you're a racist. You're scum. The reason I mention this is we're in upheaval. And this is not just us. Look at Britain and Brexit. Look at the Germans and wie heißt das? Alternative für Deutschland, the populists in Germany. Things are changing. So we're headed in a different direction. So politically, it's hard to predict. Now, here's the good news. Even the scum, you know who I mean, when they make horrible changes to the law, they grandfather. So you might get some prospective change. I don't think you're going to see retroactive. I'll give you an example, this recent so-called Secure Act. Now, 2 comments on the Secure Act. This is the one that killed the stretch Roth IRA, the inherited IRAs. First of all, it was overwhelmingly bipartisan, which is always bad. When those people agree on something, it ain't good for anybody. Second, you all are too damn cheap to protect yourselves. You all deserved it. In other words, Roth IRAs are not quite as good a tool as they once were once they passed this law recently. And that affects all of you, and you deserve it. You know why? You're too damn cheap and too focused on work to fight. Most of you won't fight. You'll talk, you'll vote. That's all you'll do. You won't fight for what this country is. You're getting exactly what you deserve. I'm not. I actually ran for office. I give money. I fight. I may lose, but by God, I'll lose with honor. Also, it was grandfathered. So when they said that we're no longer allowing the inherited IRAs to be measured over the lifetime of the person who inherits, usually a child or grandchild, it's now limited roughly to 10 years. There are exceptions, but it's roughly 10 years. If you happen to inherit before January 1st of 2020, you got the old rules. Now that would be a problem. Like, it's a good thing my father or father-in-law wasn't on life support December 31st. Right? Because it'd be tempting. You're like, look, he's going to go. And I know he would want the last thing he does to be to screw the government. And so if I happen to trip on the cord to the ventilator, I mean, maybe that's a little bit too Youngstown. It's where I grew up. It's kind of like The Sopranos without the good restaurants. So where's it going? We don't know. We know some of the Democrats don't like it. They're pretty much like, well, we don't really need to encourage you to give money to help these areas. We're going to take it from you. And we're going to put money into projects like Cabrini Greens in Chicago because that worked so well, we want to do it again. And this time's going to be different. That's their mentality. So could I see them prospectively? Let's say they were to sweep. I don't see it happening, especially in the Senate. So they don't have the ability in a regulatory fashion to change it very quickly, which is what they like to do. They don't like people voting. They'd much rather just have the court tell you, oh, no, abortions, not only are they legal, you have to have them. Yeah, Constitution said so. Or through the regulatory agencies. You'll see some of that maybe, because they're a lot less friendly. Guys, you have no idea how much this administration has done to make your lives easier and get rid of regulation. It doesn't get put in the media. I see it because I'm the one reading the regs. Did you know that right now the Trump administration is trying to make healthcare portable for everybody? You see, right now health insurance is based on your job. And if you lose the job, you lose the insurance, now your condition becomes what? A pre-existing condition and you can't get insurance. Why do we have that system? It sounds kind of dumb, and it is. Why do we have that? Unintended consequences of socialism. Back in the 30s when tax rates were 90%, what was exempt from those rates? Health insurance provided by your employer. Why? Because Congress said so. So what happened to health insurance? It all shifted to the employer. Why? Because the tax code gave you an incentive to do it. Who wrote the tax code? The socialists. So we got this system that they caused. What's the Trump administration's fix? In June of last year, they came out with these regulations. They're trying to create 401ks for healthcare. Google Health Reimbursement Account, HRA, individual coverage. The employer puts money into this account. You can spend it however you want. It could be on insurance, it could be on medical costs. What's the one requirement for you to qualify for that account? There's only one requirement. That instead of a group plan through the employer, which is what we normally do and does not work well, leaves a lot of people uninsured, that's bad. You have to have an individual coverage plan that when you leave the job, it goes with you. Who here has heard of that? Who here has not heard of that? There's your press for you, people. There's your press. So, long answer to, you knew it was going to be a loaded question. You can't ask questions like, what's going to happen to the law to someone as partisan as me? I'm sorry? Health reimbursement account, HRA, I would Google both terms. Trump, individual coverage. Individual coverage, and that's what it's called. And you can also Google just ICHRA, individual coverage HRA, ICHRA. By the way, for any of you with employees, think about it. Here's tax-wise the planning you have to do before you sign up for one. So it's a great idea. If your employees are lower paid, you want to think before you set one of those up. Why? You'd be better off adding to their salary, and it's taxable to them, and just tell them this extra $5,000 or whatever it is you give is to your salary, but it's for health care. That's what you're supposed to use it for. I can't force you to do that. If you want to go snort up, non-prescribed medicine, that's your business. But the reason that might be better for some of your employees, if they get the Obamacare subsidy, the individual coverage HRA kills that. So if they qualify for individual coverage, they don't get the Obamacare subsidy. Now, I'm not for the subsidy, but if it exists, am I going to take advantage of it? Yeah. Am I going to help my people take advantage of it? My employees? You're damn right I am. So just be aware of that issue. How are we doing on time? 5 minutes? Okay, cool. 1, 2. 1, 2.
So question, if I follow your sequence of opportunities, follow it to a T, and let's say...
I like where you're going. So he says if he follows my sequence to a T, it's the only way I can get people to obey me. It's the only way I can get any women in particular. I talked to my wife about that. Hey, remember that part about obey? And she says, oh no, that was one way. We haven't had our discussion. He can tell me about it. When you marry a Latina. That's a whole separate discussion.
Buy a house for $50,000, put $60,000 into rehab.
Okay, buy for 50, put 60 in, we're good.
Maybe it's worth $200 when it's all said and done.
Worth 200 when it's said and done.
Can I refinance it and keep it within the system of having it in the opportunity?
Great question, very good question. So he buys for 50, rehabs for 60, followed all the rules, clearly qualified. Can he refi? Yes. Can he keep the money in the company and use it to do more fun stuff? Yes. Can he distribute the profits? Certainly not for the first 2 years. After that, you can distribute operating income. Here's what the government does not want. They don't want you cashing out your investment. You invested a certain amount of money, let's say 100 grand, in these areas. They want the money to stay in that area. They want the area to be better. They want it to be better, and they do have an anti-abuse rule that says if you're not following the purposes of the statute, we can disallow it. What's the purpose of the statute? To build these places up, to make them nicer, to either improve the buildings, to actually improve the properties there, or to provide jobs for the people who live there. That's what they want to see. Pulling your money out of that is inconsistent with that goal. They want you to keep the money there. So can you refi? Hell, can you rent it, 1031 it within the Opportunity Zone fund, put the money into a new Opportunity Zone qualifying property, rehab it, and keep going with internal 1031s in the fund, or refis, or hell, can you just sell it taxable, eat the tax, but keep the money in the fund and keep building, 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 building? Yeah, how long do you have to do it? Till 2028. Till 2028.
I've got a tax-free sale.
I've got the mic, hang on, I'll bring it to you.
Jim, did anybody walk out in disgust yet?
Not really. One person. All right, who had questions? Yeah?
I feel like a failure. You know, either your screening has gotten a lot better, or I need to up my game.
Hey, John, I've got a tax-free sale and fund after the fund turns 10 years, but I've also got a cost seg on land and improvements at 15. What's the difference? I think I missed something.
Well, because so if you look at Section 1250 recapture, it's the excess over straight line. So if you wrote off the Section 1250 property all in year 1 with bonus depreciation, and you sell in year 10, you still have 5 years of straight line that's the difference between what you took. So that portion would be recaptured.
Real quick, you mentioned dates earlier. You said 12/31/2026. Was that a hard date, or was that based on a hypothetical?
No, 2026 is the date the capital gains become due. So whatever capital gains you invest in this fund, whether you invested them last year, this year, or December 1st of 2026, they're due 12/31/26.
Can that money be pulled out of the...
That date is as hard as the liquor in that bar. 1, 2.
Does this qualify for seller financing, or do you have to purchase the property outright?
You can buy the property on seller financing. Now remember, I'm both an accountant and a lawyer. And so they fight, which is fun, because the lawyer always beats the hell out of the accountant. An accountant is a person who says, when you ask them a great question, show me where the law says I can do it, or we're not going to do it. The lawyer says, show me where it's prohibited, otherwise we're doing it. So just understand what happens when the attorney side wins the discussion. Have you heard how you can tell if your accountant's an extrovert? He looks at your shoes when he talks to you instead of his shoes.
And it's clean. All right, who had the next question? Here you go, I got the mic, hang on.
Cap gains in 2026, do those have to be paid? Cap gains in 2026, do those have to be paid out of the fund? Or
No.
can they be paid with extra money that's floating around?
The cap gains they come from you personally when they're due. And you can accelerate the due date. There are certain, for example, if you take your investment out of the fund before 2026, and why would you do that? Let me give you an example. Bernie wins. For 2020, he's still alive. And we can tell, or they've got technology where the mirror still fogs in spite of his status. He wins in 2024. You see this, it's November 2023, or the election will be 2024, so he's coming in January of 2025. So what do you do in December 2025? I like cap gains rates at 15%. Bernie's already said they're going to be 90%. I'm accelerating that gain. We're not going to sit around and wait for that to happen, buddy.
2 questions, John. When you're borrowing money on a property, you mentioned that thankfully they're not going to tax us on the gain on that portion, right? but how about the depreciation recapture on that portion of the debt?
So depreciation recapture, this what I'm about to tell you, I spent about 8 hours figuring out. It was hard to find. So Section 1250 recapture, which is when real estate is depreciated faster than straight line, and in today's Internal Revenue Code, that's only possible with land improvements. So if you get land improvements and you take the bonus depreciation on them, you're faster than straight line, so there's an issue. Section 1245, that's the personal property. That kind of recapture gets taxed. That's any depreciation on personal property gets taxed. The recapture where you depreciate something and instead of paying 15 or 20% cap gains rates, you pay 25%, which is technically not recapture. It's unrecaptured Section 1250 recapture is, yeah, right? Only the government can come up with that. That is considered capital gain. And that's good for two reasons. If I sell a rental property and the gain is a combination of recapture on the depreciation, but it's not 1250 or 1245, it's just the 25% bracket, plus the normal capital gains bracket, all that's capital gains. It's just taxed at different rates. All of that can be invested in the fund. Second, if I have a property that I depreciated the hell out of, and let's say I didn't do any cost seg study, I just took the depreciation, so the only recapture is at 25%. It's tax-free on sale, all of it.
Including the debt portion?
All of it.
Okay.
All of it.
The other question is, I think previously, one of the criteria for qualifying was never being depreciated before in the operation.
Yeah, so here's the deal. There was a theory that I had discussed, and the new regs kill this. So good news is you can rely on the old regs for anything you've done to date. One of the things they put in the old regulations was if we change our mind, and you acted based on these present temporary regs, you can rely on these, but only for that period of time. So here was the theory. The IRS said anything that's never been depreciated is quote unquote new. So some people were buying residences on the theory it was never rented. Now, there's a flaw with that even under the old law, one that I pointed out frequently, proving it, because the burden of proof's on you. So you bought a house built in 1920, and you're like, yeah, it's always been a personal residence, and nobody ever used it as a home office. It was never rented out or used as a home office, so it was never depreciated, so I don't have to rehab it. It counts as quote-unquote new. My response as an IRS agent would be, prove it. Oh, are you going to interview the guy who was in there in 2020? You can't, or, sorry, 1920? No, you can't. Right, that's a hard thing to prove. So there were issues to begin with, but now the anti-abuse regulations said, look, the purpose is to see properties improved. And so if you use this to not improve a property or not provide jobs somehow, we're going to have a problem with that. Here's what they're really after, land banking. They do not want to see land banking, because here's where some of the theories. We're going to buy a piece of land in the opportunity zone. It needs to be a quote-unquote trade or business. I didn't get into that. Guys, there are some details I did not get into. Just no time. You didn't want to know anyway. Trust a nice lawyer. So it has to be a trade or business. So there was a theory you could buy this great big piece of land and put a hot dog stand on it, and that's your trade or business, and just sit on the land and sell it eventually tax-free, the appreciation. And IRS was all over that. They were on that like a pit bull on a debt collector. So that was absolutely the prototype of what they do not want to see. They want you to do something with that land, build something, make this place better. It makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, that was the purpose of the law. Other questions?
Last question again.
And then,
so if somebody doesn't know where their opportunity zones are, how easy is it to go find them? So they know exactly the trajectory of the map in their area.
well, so the key there is current data. There are some maps that are outdated. So you got to Google the hell out of it and make sure, and if you're going to invest money in here, you want to make real damn sure where's the current opportunity zone, what's the official register it's listed on. It's all census tracked. So once you get the list of census tracts, and by the way, close does not count. This is not a horseshoes and hand grenades type thing. Close does not count. So if it's across the street, sorry. Last but not least, two quick things. One, I don't have business cards, right? I'm trying to save the environment. I'm that way. I'm just that way.
Same way.
If you,
Don't have any-
if you go to IRAlawyer.com or realestatetextlaw.com, they all point to the same site, taxreductionlawyer.com. So those are the three sites: IRAlawyer.com, realestatetextlaw.com, taxreductionlawyer.com. We do provide services. Most of our clients are real estate investors. They're all over the country. I'll tell you right off the top, I'm not cheap, and I'm worth every nickel. I'm not cheap, and I'm worth every nickel.
He's telling the truth.
For once. I only lie on the clock. We don't do that for free. We do workshops, and several of you have been to them. We've got a workshop coming up
Who's
in...
been to John's workshop? Raise your hand. Was it awesome? John Corey, stand up. How was it?
Oh yeah, my brain hurt the first day.
But only your brain, John. We didn't abuse any other part of you, just to be clear. Oh, tempting as it was.
Very nice.
So we do, the next one is June 10 through June 17th in Puerto Rico. And the way we do it, the classes are only 5 hours a day, because in Puerto Rico, where there's rum and sun and beaches, after lunch, tax discussion, even with my flair for entertainment, ain't gonna happen. So we do have kind of, and we did it in June, in spite of the fact that it's kind of warm there in June, but people complained last time that they couldn't bring families. We did it in April, and it was, it cut some of the attendance because people want to bring the whole family. So, and
The 10th to the 17th?
Yep.
How do they register?
I don't...
They're right there. You didn't have a beard.
No, I got to change the picture. I've infiltrated Puerto Rican society. Guys, I'll tell you what, when I dress in slacks, a short sleeve shirt with a collar, and I have the beard, people there talk to me in Spanish. If I shave and if I shave and wear shorts and t-shirt, they talk to me in English. And then of course, as soon as they hear my accent, because my accent is so not Puerto Rican, oh, you're gonna love this. We'll have to translate it for the rest of them. In my wife's Spanish, the word for sorbeto is paja. And so I went into a restaurant and asked for a paja. Yeah. She's red. She's okay, so in my wife's, yeah. She's gonna pop that baby, man. It's happening. So the word for straw, because Spanish dialects differ a lot. So the word for straw in my wife's Spanish, which is what I use to go into a Puerto Rican restaurant and ask for, in Puerto Rican Spanish means to pleasure yourself alone. And it was great. So I asked for that, and the whole staff starts dying, and I'm used to it. I'm kind of like, all right, what did I say? And the waitress, actually, I love it, because she had a little bit of composure, and she said, "Sir, you'll need to go to the restroom for that. We won't be assisting." It was wonderful. But so that's where you can find us. The workshop's not even up on the website yet. It probably won't be up for another week or two.
If they want to come in June. Guys, there's a very high probability I'm going to go. How would somebody register? Do they email you?
If you email us, help@realestatetexlaw.com, help@realestatetexlaw.com.
Taxlaw.com.
And my assistant, Grecia, because there are two Latinas who run my life, and you can have the number for one. So Grecia, my assistant, she'll get you hooked up as soon as it's up. And plan ahead. She's very good. Like if you want to go see the sites, El Yunque, you want to go to the bioluminescent bay. Of course, we're going to make a trip to the Bacardi, the distillery. We have to have a tasting tour, which no one will remember.
I've done it by Lee's Bay. It's amazing.
Yep, it's the same one.
Same one, she's good.
Yeah. Yeah, so...
And last thing, John, like if you're ready to go on Opportunity Fund, how do they start the process with you?
Shoot us an email. We've been raising the price, and so far nobody's done anything about it. So we're presently at $5,000 all inclusive. We set up both entities. You have Q&A for 1 year, but it's Q&A for OZ Fund questions only. And we're very specific about that in our engagement letter. No, because I know how you people, what do you mean by you people? You investors.
But my trade or business is real estate and it's in the opportunity zone, so therefore all my accounting taxes.
You come along and you try that with us. You read your use agreement, and then we'll do the first tax return for each one of the entities as well.
So we're going to email you.
Help@realestatetaxlaw.com, yep.
Did everybody get that? Write it down. Help at real estate.
We do a lot of planning work in general, so we do a lot with self-directed IRAs. We have a lot of people who come in and just bring all their stuff, their books, their records, their entity structure, and they flop it down and go, what can you do?
You're doing tax returns for...
We are doing returns right now, so we'll take quotes on returns. Let me give you 2 criteria. Either UBIT returns, because we are doing the 990Ts for UBIT, and I'm trying to scale that. That's a very scalable business, and very few people do it. And the other one is good-sized operation will do all the returns. So like if you're just getting started, you don't want me for your returns. The price, it's not a good price for you. You don't need me for that kind of return, probably.
Is there a reason to file a UBIT return even if you don't have UBIT?
Yeah, if you don't have UBIT and you file a UBIT return, it starts the statute of limitations in gray situations. So for example, you bought, rehabbed, and sold 3 properties in your IRA or 401k or whatever. Is that subject to UBIT? That's a little bit gray. It's similar to the dealer question. Are you doing enough business that it's dealer property? It's a very similar question. It's gray. If you don't file a UBIT return, the statute of limitations is open forever. If you file a 0 return with nothing on it but your information, and then you fill in zeros in all the blanks, that actually starts the statute of limitations. Does it increase your chance for an audit? In a rational world, it would. In the world, I mean, even by government standards, the IRS, the incompetence and the negligence are utterly breathtaking. You wouldn't believe some of the stories I have to tell you. They're like the anti-Darwinian process. Right? Only the incompetent people tend to stay. There are a few exceptions, but in a place where you don't get promoted for being excellent and where you don't get punished for being a screw-up, anybody want to take a guess at what kind of people tend to stay?
All right, let's go back to that really quick, because it's
Democrats?
counterintuitive now to think about filing a tax return when you don't owe any tax.
So John, should I
And it
file?
draws a line in the sand, and it's smart to do.
It starts a clock. They have a certain amount of time to audit you. So yeah, if you file the UBIT return, only in a gray situation. Like if you clearly have no UBIT.
I'm not going to ask how many people operate in gray, because it's a high percentage.
In this room?
Very high percentage.
Yeah. Yeah.
I won't raise my hand. So, opportunity funds, email to where?
Help@realestatetaxlaw.com.
Okay. If you want to come in June, same email.
Yep. And just look, guys, we do webcasts, we do articles, of course, all sorts of inappropriate and offensive political content.
Toned down, though, I think.
You know what it is, though?
More politically correct than
I've
5 years ago.
Whoa, hey. No. Okay, I've chilled. No, well, first of all, you moved to a Caribbean island full of very laid-back, fun people. What do you think? I mean, it was funny, though, because my kids are like, Dad, you're so much more chill in general.
It isn't just me.
And I said, yeah, but that's because you're in college, nobody's pregnant. 2 of you have scholarships. I did my job. I'm serious. Part of that, things just calmed down some. You got a few important things done. So now I can...
So here's, besides John being one of the smartest people I've ever met, here's one of the things I love about John.
He's also dancing.
Is an amazing family man.
There you go.
Who loves his wife and cherishes his wife.
Or else.
As every man in this room really should.
Well, thank you.
And you really love your kids in a big way. So don't let all this fun stuff not see the tender side of John Hyre. That's my insider tip to every person.
Oh, thank you.
He's an example on how to lead a family, and he does it privately, but it's there. So thank you, John.
Thank you. Love you, John. Thanks. Kind words. Thank you.